Hi, everybody. I'm CiCi. I am an alcoholic and I am actually located in northeastern Ohio. That is where my home group's at. As David had mentioned, I am pretty into the YPA scene up in my area. I'm actually on a bid committee so that we can host next year's conference up in my hometown. And I do plan on going to this year's OEPA if anyone's interested for more information, but I'll talk about that later. So a little bit more about me and where I was at. So I was originally born on the West Coast. I'm from Washington State. Both my parents were in the military. However, due to my father's qualifications for this program, my parents did not stay together. And my mom ended up moving me and my older brother back to Ohio. And that's pretty much where I've been since. I do have reason to believe that my father is a part of this program. He had reached out to me probably like a good 10 to 15 years ago, as I was becoming of age, just to try to establish a relationship and to reach out. He had turned his life around. But at that time, I wasn't ready to hear from him or anything about the program. In my alcoholic mind, I was resentful at him for his disease. Right. But all the meantime, my own disease was developing. Unfortunately, my first drink was at the age of 5. I remember I was playing on the swing set in the backyard and I cut my foot on a rock and my uncle poured a beer on it to clean it, sanitize it. I'm like, well, if you're drinking that, why are you pouring it on my foot? Blah, blah, blah. So he gave me a sip and I remember it was the grossest thing I'd ever put in my mouth. I couldn't understand why he was drinking it. And unfortunately for me and my disease, it didn't matter how gross things tasted. I drank it too. But that was my first interaction with alcohol. From there on, I decided when I turned 13, I was going to be that kid. And I picked up smoking and drinking. And I had a group of friends and everything like that, but not all of them thought like I did. I had a select group within my friends group that I would drink and smoke with, smoke cigarettes with. And then, I don't know, kind of behind everybody's back. So from a young age, even amongst my peers, I got into the habit of just hiding my drinking. That progressed, well into my adult life where when I became of age to drink, it was very apparent that I drank differently than my friends, so they didn't inviting me over to their house to drink, but they didn't mind going out and meeting up, as long as I had a separate driver and stuff, which kind of led me into several different codependent relationships with men, mostly because I wanted somebody who could drive me around so I could drink the way I wanted to and hang out with my friends when they wanted to drink with me. But like I said, they didn't really drink how I drank. So they didn't want me coming over to their house and stuff. They didn't like going out every night. I quickly became a at-home drinker. And I stayed that way, and it progressed throughout the first several years of my daughter being born. Because at that time in college, I almost failed out for drinking, but I showed up every day, hungover at 7:30 for this history class. And I don't know how, but the teacher let me pass and everything. And he's like, maybe you should look into things about, why you're not doing so well in this class. And it might have to do with some of your personal choices. Of course, I didn't pay any attention to his warnings. I thought it was super cool that he let me pass just because even though he knew I was struggling, I kept trying. I was really good at not getting consequences. In my mind, consequences. At the time, they were all just inconveniences, whether I was getting pulled over. And of course, I had an excuse for that, or, why this relationship didn't work. It was always the other person's fault. And one time when I was working, and that was it, that I had a hard time staying employable throughout all this because I was not reliable to wake up early in the morning to try to get to work, which didn't work so well with being a single mom because I only had daycare for, between these hours and this hour. So I had to try to find a job that I could have a babysitter for, but still allowed me to drink the way that I wanted to. So I ended up in retail for a few years, but I always had to have a second job or a third job just to keep up with drinking how I wanted to drink because I felt like I deserved it for all the hard work that I did. As my drinking progressed, so did my disease. And it just kind of turned into whatever got me out of myself was what I wanted. And that's pretty much when my focus on my disease shifted to the point where I even went so far as to send my daughter to go live with her dad so that I could continue to drink the way that I wanted to. And again, I'm not looking at these as consequences. I'm looking at these as an inconvenience for my disease. I was, super excited about COVID at the time, which I don't know who gets excited about that, but I'm okay, there's an excuse why I can't pay my electric bill. There's an excuse why I can't pay my rent. All that money that I have, instead of paying it on my bills, I can use that to keep drinking the way that I want to. I don't have to go into work. So I just like completely forego all responsibilities that I had so that I could focus on drink, because I had it in my head that I was going to get it back together after COVID had lifted. And unfortunately, that's not how diseases work. Mine continued to progress. I was in and out of treatment centers. As much as I like to consider myself an intelligent person, like I couldn't grasp being sober, especially at my age. I'm like, well, that's not fair. I want to be sponsored by the person who's got like a couple years, but it's like they got sober like later in life. Like, how did they spend all this time drinking? And I don't know, like I just had a really sick, warped process on the whole recovery aspect, any of it. So I did end up moving into sober living. I lived in two houses. One was a little further down south where I originally got sober and was able to maintain that for a while. I started working in a program. I got a sponsor. The only thing was that I did not utilize my sponsor. Like, I wouldn't call her. I didn't set any time to go through the book with her. I just thought, I had a sponsor. I had a meetings that I went to. Why would I need a home group per se? So like I never signed up. I never got active in any kind of service. I was a seat warmer. But I'm grateful for even that part of my life, because like some of the stuff started like sinking in, and it was leaving those little like seeds of sobriety like that I was going to need later on in life. I went through that. I was doing okay enough because I was trying to understand some of the stuff, what is step one, what is step two, what is step three. The only thing is, because I wasn't utilizing everything how they're supposed to be, I couldn't comprehend any of it. So whereas I knew I needed to be there, I just didn't know how to make that spiritual connection to actually get to those steps and to be able to apply them on a daily basis versus just a conversational basis. Eventually I feel like things aren't either working out the way they are, or they're working too well. And I'm back in my daughter's life, got a job again, like things came back. And I'm like, just because I'm sober, like, I'm starting to see the promises come true, and I'm not realizing any of the work that I was doing in those moments that I was trying to understand, the program and the steps. But because like as soon as I was out of that environment, like I stopped doing them. And eventually like I stopped going to those environments. I stopped going to meetings. I completely ghosted my sponsor, and I thought, I could do it on my own. And it didn't work out that way. I downloaded an app to try to take myself through this stuff. I ended up drinking over it. It went very bad very quickly for me. Like, I'm not an in-between gray area person. Like, it's either going to be great or it's not. And me like trying to tap do any of it definitely availed me nothing. It wasn't until like this time around where I'm able to look back at why things went well and why they didn't. So, of course, I start drinking again. And one of my friends that I'd met in treatment turned to me and goes, well, I'll only let you drink with me if you promise to go to a meeting the next day. And in my alcoholic mind, I'm like, no problem. Like, that's a really weird requirement, is to have me go to a meeting when we're going to drink together tonight. But whatever, like, I'll go to the meeting. And that was probably like the best reverse psychology that anyone had ever done for my life at that point, because I did end up going to that meeting. And it was the only young people meeting in our area that I just so happened to show up to. It was the first time I'd ever been there. I saw some people that I'd met like a few years ago when I had a significant other who was in the program. And it was just such a like surreal feeling, because I'm like, man, like it was so welcoming. It was so loving. Like, for the first time in my life, like I was spiritually jealous of like other people's happiness and like where they're at and everything that was going on. And they're like, I wanted that for myself. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't have what they had. I'm a very analytical person. At this time, I did not think I needed a God of my understanding to be sober. I didn't need the 12 steps to be a decent person. And that started to shift when I got to see the program in action. And it's not because they're the first people I'd ever saw work in a program. It was the first time that I stepped out of myself enough to see the program working in other people's lives. Because before I was just so clouded with my own self. I didn't want it to work before. Fast forward, not even a week later, 5 days, it was a Wednesday. And that friend that told me, I could drink with him as long as I went to a meeting the next day. Well, I went to go pick him up for a court date, and he was sick. He was so sick. He didn't stop drinking after I had left. And like, that was just the first time, like, it really hit me. Like, I've had physical consequences where, I've literally been on the brink of death because of my drinking. I've had my organs shutting down. I have a bone disease that's progressed so greatly because of my alcoholism, but none of that registered to me as me like hurting myself as badly as I was. Just seeing him, I'm like, but that was like a 5-day difference. And I'm like, what is the only thing that was different was that for some reason, I went to that meeting and I kept going to another one. And that was, I don't know, like that was just like kind of like my moment. I'm like, that was the difference, was that we both drank this day. He kept drinking and I started going to these meetings. I started putting myself in with the solution. And I just like, I don't know. I walked out of his house. I called this lady who gave me her phone number at that meeting that I went to, the young people's meeting. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've tried getting sober before, none of it worked. Like, I tried teaching myself how to be sober. I used to take psychology classes to try to figure out like, why am I so psychologically messed up? Like, what's so wrong with me that I need to fix? And like, I couldn't figure it out. And I give up. Like, if this is the only difference, if this is what's going to get me sober, then can you help me, or can you find somebody who can sponsor me? And she agreed to sponsor me. That next Friday we got together to start our sponsorship, like working together. And I remember like, I didn't remember, she actually reminded me the first time I led, I showed up there with all the statistics of why I was not going to be able to stay sober. Scientifically, it's proven that I'm going to relapse. I'm going to be another statistic. Like, I'm not going to make it through, but I want to try. If there's a 2% chance that I can be successful, like I want to be that 2%. Like I said, the physical consequences weren't enough. As much outside validation as I wanted in my life, none of the physical barriers were enough to get me to change. It wasn't until like I hit that point where, I don't know, it's almost like more than I just wanted it for myself. Like I needed it, I no longer wanted a life not sober. And we did, like we got into it. It was easy for me to understand step one, like something's going wrong in my life that I'm not able to drink like other people, and other people don't want to be around me when I'm drinking. And how she worked me through those steps. She helped me to understand and be able to recognize them within myself. And that's been a huge, powerful tool that I try to utilize to this day, and what I try to teach my girls that I'm taking through the steps. Step two was my hardest one. As I had mentioned before, I didn't have a God of my understanding. I sought God out before in my life, never with an open heart, never with an open mind. I wanted other people's relationship with their God to fix my problem. But I never sought out that relationship for myself. That took me quite a few months of like actually like trying to grasp that concept and be willing to believe it. I don't know. And as soon as it happened, as soon as I just had some inkling of willingness to believe that something out there could love me, could restore me to sanity, could bring me to where I'm supposed to be, where they have always meant for me to be. I don't know, like that was probably like my first real God conscious connection that I had. And then I just kind of like flew into it. I'm like, okay, like as soon as I got that willingness to leave, like I was ready. I'm like, okay, let's do this third step. Like I'll turn my life over, and I do it every day. I know if like I oversleep and I forget to do it, like when I first wake up and my day's just like wrecked, running on self-will, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I surround myself with people today who will look at me and be like, did you turn it over? Did you do your thing today? And did you do your prayers? Did you meditate? Like, what's up with you? And I'm grateful for them, because sometimes I need help from others to keep myself checked in place, because I do believe my God can work through other people. And I try to keep a very conscious idea of who I keep around me to help keep that balance and to help me to continue to grow. My fourth and fifth, as you can tell, I'm a pretty long-winded person. I talk a lot. Fourth step was probably like an entire notebook. The only reason I don't know for sure is because I wrote it between 3 different notebooks, and I had color categorized everything in it. So I was really controlling that situation still. And then when it came to my fifth step, like we sat through from start to finish. And 11 hours later, like we walked away, and I was like, okay, like this is it. But while I was writing that fourth, I did start getting really down on myself. Like it brought up a lot of other memories and ideas that I had gone through, and that nice tidbit of information that somebody had suggested to me was to write a gratitude list whenever I stopped working on my fourth for the day or the night, And I needed that in my life, and I still need that in my life today. Like I need to sit and think about all the things I am grateful for, and all the things that I am capable of doing when I do the right thing. And that not everything in my life is a mistake, and that helps me to practice 6 and 7. I know my character defects. I carry them around in my big book. Some of them are a lot more glaringly obvious than others, but everyone knows when I have a shortcoming. Everyone can see like that full character defect in use, but most importantly, I can see when it's in use. And that gives me that opportunity to correct it so that I don't continue to hurt people and that I don't continue to hurt myself with them either. 8 and 9, I used the information from step 4 to do my 6. Sorry, I'm going to hop around real quick. My 3rd and my 7th were prayers that I wrote myself to my higher power based off of the 3rd and 7th step prayers. That list was my 8th. You know, there were only a few people that I had to add to it that had never hurt me, but they were people that I had hurt. I'd never had a resentment against them, but I know that I had hurt them deeply, including my daughter. She's still young enough where like she doesn't fully understand amends and everything, but that's where Olivia Men come into play. You know, that friend that I talked about who told me to go to a meeting, he was sober for a little while and it was great and it was beautiful and he was taking care of the stuff that I needed to. And one of them was an emergency surgery from an accident that he was in. He wasn't spiritually going to be able to recover from that before he put his family through, another run with this disease. He ended up taking his own life. That's one that so like one of the things that I do today is like I keep in contact with his family and like there are other people that I owe amends to that unfortunately are no longer here for me to physically make that amends to. I'm still working on a graveside amends for one, but the living amends are probably the biggest one that even when I have a conversation with somebody who is alive and well and I've made those amends to carry through with it with those living amends. My 10, 11, and 12, I try to do daily. I usually keep in contact with my sponsor on the 10th. 11th, I try to do in with my amends with my higher power. And the 12th is being of service any way that I can. And I try to stay active in anything AA in my hometown and the surrounding area. So that is about it.